Is our guy Adam Terry. He is fresh back from Cal. And Adam, I've been saying, you watch all season. That felt like the most 60-minute game we've seen so far from the Orange. What do you make of what you saw out there on Saturday?
How about them Orange, right? That's what I get to take away off of. You look at all three phases of the games, pretty succinct in what they were doing, and it's a long trip across country. So those guys were really dialed in, and it's just one of those games where right out of the jump, things were going extremely well for them. Able to move the football. They stalled out on their first two series going with the field goals. But, man, the hot take of the game was the turnover battle, and California's in the top 10 in turnovers. But Syracuse does what they need to do on that, and they accomplish a huge road win and a huge ACC victory.
And tell us a little bit about the first quarter specifically, Adam, because I imagine a lot of Syracuse fans missed the first quarter. Hand raised. I was trying to flip back and forth, but a lot was going on there in the basketball game. I'm watching the stats. I'm like, all right, long drives here. We know that. I want to know about these turnovers, especially Davian Kerr. Like he gets tossed into the mix here late in the season. A lot of injuries at corner. What you see out of him? He got a pick in there, and what kind of player do the Orange have in Davian Kerr? And his twin brother obviously is coming in next year.
Well, I think the biggest thing that you see out of Syracuse right now is that they've recruited well and they've got some depth. Right? Historically, Syracuse hasn't had a lot of depth in any of the positions, and whether it's the offensive line or secondary where they get depleted, those are positions where we've seen depletions over the years. The O-line is working in a rotation, and then you see Kerr high point the ball. He goes up, and it's a heck of a throw by Mendoza. He's trying to get it in there, and he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. 4 on the year. Kerr is able to go up, high point the ball, pull it away. It was just one of those where you're like, oh, okay, that's good. And then you've also got the Marlowe Wax one where he ran the route for him, right? So he's sitting in there. He knows what's coming right at him, and boom, he gets that pick. And, you get to see a little bit that Maryland shuffle as the old running back he was. Showed a little bit of speed, but not too much. So it was good. I just thought when you're watching those turnovers, you're saying, okay, these guys were dialed in. They knew what was coming at them. And when it was a lineman assignment technique and they were able to execute, bing, bang, boom, that's how football should be.
Yeah, and it's obviously we still have to bounce back as well from the BC game. I look at the run defense in this game, and yeah, they hit the 75-yarder, and then Ott had a 50-some-odd-yarder later. Obviously, you'd prefer not to have that, but it did feel leaps and bounds improvement from a week before, did it not, Adam?
Well, when you saw Thomas break that first one early, that's that point of the game where I'm saying, hey, we get another turnover here, or not even turnover, but a turnover on downs, and you're able to mount something. You're feeling really good about your situation. But this was one where the big run, that 75-yarder, you're like, man, I wish I could have had that one back. Because it looks as though it's just a missed fit by the safety coming down. Everybody's kind of in the right gap, so you're like, okay, they polished that up. And for the most part, the rest of the game, it was polished. You got to tip your cap to Ott. This was really his first game back where he's seeing a lot of carries. He hasn't had the year that they wanted out of him, and you saw the emergence of Javian Thomas. So, this is not the team that they're going to have to line up against. And, Boston College has, an extra tackle, a couple tight ends, a kitchen sink, where this was a little bit of a normal fit game for them, where they're spread out a little bit more. It's not all these large bodies leaning on them, and they did a very good job with that.
Yeah, and I forget if it was the touchdown or the other long one by Ott. Like Devin Grant had a very odd pursuit angle on one of them, which certainly allowed him to get out for some extra yardage. But then, we look at these guys up front, these two freshmen in Perry and Watson. I get they're freshmen, right? But it feels like you got two dudes there that maybe not at the height of their powers yet, nor should they be as 18 and 19-year-olds. But it again goes to your point, right, Adam, of the recruiting that was done last year by Fran and guys that hopefully can be playing that spot for a while.
Well, the thing at the beginning of the year was there were guys in front of him. And, with Watson, he's kind of played his way into it. But I had a conversation with one of the guys that came up for the Senior Bowl. They were doing their scouting of their older guys. And, it was Perry who was snapping people back and delivering a good hand strike. You could see their next snap as an offensive lineman, and that's just pure power. So you see these intangibles that all these guys have, and you're like, hey, they could do this. Well, that's what they're starting to do. Late in the season, they're getting more reps, and they are doing it. So that's the promising part is you've got a couple dudes, Perry being out of the Dino Babers era recruiting, and then Watson being in this new recruiting class. Like, that's a good thing. The guys that they kept, the guys that are staying are really building, and then they're starting to add those young pieces in. We saw the transfer portal and how prolific that was for us this year. But now you're starting to see that internal free agency where you're going out, I should say more the draft, where you're going out and you're picking these guys up. You think they could be something. You're projecting on them, and now they're starting to come together. So that's fun to watch. And like I said earlier, you've got a couple guys in there that are just waiting for their turn, and not necessarily waiting as a bad thing, but there are a couple guys that are in front of them that are better dudes. And when they get the opportunity, they're starting to seize it. That to me is the crucial part that we were able to see with Syracuse versus Cal. A couple of these guys that haven't gotten in a lot, they didn't skip a beat. In some cases, they really turned the game around.
Yeah, we got Adam Terry with us. And Adam, you know this. Like, go back to, pick any of the seasons that fell apart at this point here in the last decade or so. Like, that's the direct opposite of what we saw, right? Like, you get to this point of the year, and option 2 or 3 on the depth chart, like couldn't handle it, right? And that's when you give up the big plays and lose games or whatever. It is so opposite from what we're used to seeing around here.
Well, it's phenomenal, right? Like, you see at the wide receiver position, Jackson Meeks really wasn't at the beginning. Now he's starting to get his play. Justice Ross Simmons still doesn't look that healthy, but when he does, oh boy, we got a player next season. And then the development of some of these other guys like Clement as a tight end. You see a 3 tight end package going in, so he's got to be doing something right in practice in order to get out there. And then the offensive line, they're in and out. You see Wolobah starting to take more starting reps. I mean, I know they were high on Weatherspoon, but if Wolobah's taking some snaps, he must be doing something in practice. And those are the things that we don't necessarily get to see is what's occurring during practice, that these guys are now climbing over the top of somebody else. Because you're not catapulting. You're just, this is a physical game, and you've got to go out and impress somebody. It's fun. Like, that was fun. And now you got to take care of business against UConn. Like, this is the one. They're 7-3. I would say that their victories are probably not as impressive as the Syracuse schedule, but they're 7-3. They must be doing something right as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was one where, the game was on the schedule. You see it at the beginning, and UConn was a mess last year. They were not a good team last year, and you're like, oh, well, you're playing that team. It's not quite that, but Syracuse should be the better team in this game coming up Saturday, as we got Adam Terry with us. Offensively, Adam, it's still a pass-first team, right? Like, McCord's still going to throw the ball around a lot, but it feels like after the Pitt game, like, the balance to LaQuint Allen makes a little more sense, right? Like, McCord's still going to throw the ball plenty, but I feel the balance we've seen now, basically after the Pitt game, really kind of makes a lot of sense for where these guys are at right now.
Yeah, no, it's and getting playmakers the ball, right? Like, the thing that we saw at the beginning of this game was, we knew Syracuse was going to come out and throw the ball, but it was how they did it, different personnel packages, multiple tight ends in a game. We knew that, hey, it was going to be a run, but you started wide, then you compressed the formation. So just, as we always call it, a little bit of window dressing, same girl, different dress, right? So you're doing all of these things in order to get back to the nuts and bolts. And like Matt and I were talking about, you're still getting the playmaker of the football, right? So you've got more guys out on the field than names that we haven't seen throughout the course of the year, but you're still, you're seeing a Gadsden. He's going to get his catches. Trevor Pena, he's going to get his catches. And then when people start to soften up, that allows for the run game. Now, most of my career, I've looked at it as a different way. You establish the run to soften up the pass. Well, what we've done right now is you start to loosen up this defense, and then because you're not running with a fullback or you're not always running with a tight end on the foot, it's just a different style where you're doing a lot of one-back runs or perimeter passes where you're getting LaQuint Allen out in space. But, it's working.
Yeah, and LaQuint, he ends up with 23 carries in the game for $109, and toss on 3 catches as well. He's well over 130 some odd yards in total offense, and he's been fantastic here over the course of the last month, and has had another really excellent, if different, season than he certainly was having at this time last year. And it brings you back to McCord, right? He's not making the mistakes here down the stretch. He had obviously the game from the depths of hell, right, against Pittsburgh, but he really seems to have cleaned up whatever went wrong in that game here down the stretch.
Hey, everybody's allowed to have some miscues in life, and they just all really mounted up in that one game.
Yeah.
But I think with the ability to spread guys out and get multiple people the ball, and you're not forcing anything. Against Pitt, you saw guys running in man coverage and really smothering them, and with a small miscue, you hit them in the back of the back shoulder instead of the front shoulder on some of these out routes. Well, Pittsburgh is a good enough defense that they jumped around, they took it. In this game against Cal, you're just saying like, oh, okay, hey, okay, all right, that was great. That's what we want as a touchdown. So there were a couple moments where you just kind of gasp a little bit, but then for the most part, 98% of it, you're just like, okay, this is Kyle McCord once again. He's the real deal, and he's putting Syracuse on a prolific run right now. And now if they capture one more, they beat UConn. Now you got a match up against Miami, and the coaching staff won't talk about it, but that's going to be a pretty cool one with Miami. The way that they are right now, for Syracuse to have the opportunity, not necessarily as a spoiler, but to go in there and we've always played a lot of those games as the role of the spoiler, but now it's, are we a contender? And that's kind of how this season's been going. Is there's been moments you're like, oh, are you a contender? And you're like, ooh, that was a tough loss. Now you're right where you need to be at the end of the year. And as Coach Mack used to say, they'll always forget September, sometimes October, but never November. And with what Fran Brown's doing right now in November, people are going to remember this season.
Yeah, if you go get these two and win that Miami game in some memorable way, like that goes on the list of games you don't forget, right? Like that goes on one of those lists going forward. And Fran has been a fascinating study here for the last year for 8 million different reasons here, Adam. And I find it always interesting. Like there's always some reason like a head coach is successful, right? Like either you can scheme it up to the next level, or you're a great recruiter, or you're a great, like Nick Saban seemed to be just a great organizational master of how he ran this stuff. Fran just seems to, just get how to relate to everybody involved in the room, right? You look at this winners get washed thing he's pulled off in the last week. He turned like some throwaway line at a press conference. He's got merch. The guys are in the locker room with body wash. Like it's unbelievable what he's done here the last week with that stuff.
Yeah, he got buy-in from day one, and these guys are really on board with him. And I think it's a situation where he doesn't stop. And when he came in, he said he was going to have elements of the old regime of a Coach Peer, George DeLeon, guys that he had kind of crossed paths with, and some he didn't, but understands what they were and what they meant to New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York as far as recruiting. Flat out, this man's a grinder, right? Like that's hard to say sometimes because everybody does, they put in the work, they do these different things. But, what I've seen is he's a grinder. He's on the phone. He's working. He's talking to the recruits. He's out on the field. He's making sure that everybody's making eye contact with him. And it's a no BS approach. So you're either buying into it or you might as well pack your bags and look somewhere else, because you're not going to be able to BS your way through a career at Syracuse now.
Yeah. So, how do you look at that as a formal player? Because you look at, the winners get washed and some of this stuff. It can play as hokey, right? If you're not delivering the real stuff the rest of the time. I'm sure you must have had a coach at some point. You're like, what are these people doing? When he tosses it in, it feels like it melds so well with the other stuff. Like the hokey can become real in a fun way, where if it's delivered in the wrong way, right, the locker room's got to look at you like, who the heck does this guy think he is?
Yeah, I think as a former guy, and I'm not at practice, but I'm around these guys quite a bit, and it's a situation where you're looking and you're going, You know, is this guy for real? You know, are they going to be able to reemerge? Are you going to be able to get Syracuse back on the map?
Mm-hmm.
You know, these were a lot of questions that I had. And, you know, I think he's fully exceeded every one. And it's the staff, it's the high energy, it's the buy-in. Look, the kids are the ones that have to go out on the field and play every down, right? If you don't buy in and you're not alignment, assignment, technique football, then you're not going to do very well in Dart. And he preaches it all the time. You know, detailed, accountable, relentless, and tough. Like, if you're not that, you're not going to make it that long at this program anymore. And I think it's a good thing, because from my perspective, being a little bit closer than some, you see the older guys starting to lead the way, the younger guys trying to follow, but the younger guys are now trying to chomp at the older guys' feet and start to say, like, hey, I want my time. I want to make this an opportunity for me.
Yeah, it's been, what are we? We're about 2 weeks shy, give or take, from when he got hired last year. So we're almost a full year into this. It has been a fascinating watch in every possible way for the last year, and we'll see how far it goes this year and beyond. All right, Adam, good stuff as always. We'll hear you, of course, on Saturday and talk again here next Monday. But thanks as always for hopping on.
Good. All right. Sounds good, Higgy.
All right. There he is, our guy, Adam Terry. Of course, you'll hear him on the air this upcoming Saturday for Syracuse and UConn, noon kick. Adam over on TK99 with Matt, Tim, and the whole crew. With that, we will take a break, and this hour brought to you by William Mattar. Our phone lines are open the rest of the way after this. 315-437-7644. Talking football, talking hoops, talking whatever on your mind. Talking a blessed day of relief for Giants fans. We'll get into that when we come back after this. It's Q Sports Talk and ESPN.